Hey y'all, and welcome to 8-Minute Methodism. My name is Dr. Jonathan Lemaster Smith, or you can call me Dr. J because my name's 27 letters long and I don't want you to have to try to spell it. I live in District 12 of the Hunger Games and try to make United Methodism and all of Methodism make more sense and do it in an entertaining way. This is part 2 of a video on what the General Conference does. I'll link to part 1 here so that you can look at it and go watch that if you missed part 1. Now let's get back into how the General Conference works and what it does. Number 7 is to provide a judicial system and a method of judicial procedure for the church, except as herein otherwise prescribed. We have a judicial branch. We allow for trial courts, church trials in the church for lay people and clergy. We have an appeals process as well as a Supreme Court, which we call the Judicial Council. It's got 9 people on it. I'm probably going to do a whole video on that, but I'll put a link in the comments if you want to go look at some of their work as part of that. Number 8 is to initiate and to direct all connectional enterprises of the church and to provide boards for their promotion and administration. We have multiple boards and agencies around our denomination. We have what we call the Connectional Table Plus, a Board of Discipleship, Board of Church and Society, Council on Finance and Administration. We'll get to that later as part of that. Publishing House, higher education and ministry boards. What we do is set up our goals and expectations as a general conference because remember, the general conference casts the vision and goals for the denomination, and then we create task force, boards, agencies, commissions, which we'll talk about later, to do that work. Each of these groups have boards as well as staff to do this work. Number 9 is to determine and provide for raising and distributing funds necessary to carry on the work of the church. As a denomination, like any other organization, we need money. We collect through offerings, grant writing, and other sources, including investments. Then we develop a budget for the church. The Council on Finance and Administration, one of our boards and agencies, presents a budget. It gets modified, voted on, changed, and this becomes the budget for each quadrennial cycle or each 4-year cycle between general conferences. They also do the work of reporting how the money comes in, how it's spent, what it's being used for, and how much money we may need from other sources. Number 10 is to fix a uniform basis upon which the bishops shall be elected by their jurisdictional conferences and to determine the number of bishops that may be elected by central conferences. This is essentially setting up more structures for how the bishops work. The jurisdictional conferences are the United States regional bodies. There are 5, and they are set up in a way that we determine how they are elected by the general conference, but the jurisdictional conferences do the electing. And in central conferences, we get to determine how many are elected, but they have more decisions in how the elections take place and how they work as bishops. What are their term limits and cycles and that sort of thing. We can explain more about bishops in another video. Number 11, to select as presiding officers from the bishops through a committee, provided that the bishop shall select from their own number the presiding officer of the opening session. General Conference needs a presiding officer. The bishops are the presiding officers and they do not get a vote at General Conference. We get to select which bishops, usually based on diversity, ability to lead, their interest in doing it as part of that, and there's a committee that does that. The bishops get to select their first presiding officer as part of that. That's the only time they get to select, although they probably make recommendations and different discussions happen as part of that. But essentially what they try to do is have bishops from around the world chairing and leading at different times based on that bishop's availability, interests, and the needs of the body at the time. Number 12 is to change the numbers and boundaries of jurisdictional conferences upon the consent of a majority of the annual conference and each jurisdictional conference involved. In the U.S., we get to change the boundaries of the jurisdiction on occasion based on interest of annual conference, population needs, and those sort of things. We do put a rule in because of issues we've had in the past that say jurisdictional conference are only geographically based, because we created one for a while based on race and put all the black churches and black pastors in that, and it overlaid all the other ones. We have since done away with that, but some of the harm caused by that is still here. So we allow for the general conference to decide how the boundaries work in conjunction with the annual conferences and the jurisdictional conferences involved in that to help be equitable about that. Number 13 is to establish such commissions for the general work of the church as may be deemed advisable. I told you we're coming back to general commissions. We often create working groups, committees, task force, those sort of things in our churches or communities to work on particular issues. On the general church level, we call them general commission. We have a general commission on communications, on the status and role of women, on religion and race, on archives and history. These groups have particular works that they are in charge of in order to further the mission and vision of the church. These groups are not permanent committees, but can be eliminated when we feel that their work is done, no longer want to fund it, or feel like a better way may come up. Number 14 is to secure the rights and privileges of membership in all agencies, programs, and the institutions of the United Methodist Church, regardless of race, gender, or status. This is to say that whenever we add people to committees, to teams, to boards and agencies, we hire people, we include people in all the different levels of church leadership. We are doing so and not based on race, gender, or status, but based on qualifications, interests, those sort of things. Because remember, historically, we have often left out people of color, women, people who don't make a lot of money, people of different age groups, those sort of things. And we want to make sure that we are conscious of making sure that we include people and include them all based on their interests, gifts, and ability to serve, not based on other qualifications or restrictions as part of that. Number 15 is to allow the annual conferences to utilize structures unique to their mission, other mandated structures notwithstanding. What that says is we want the annual conferences to be able to do ministry in ways that are contextual and make sense in their situation, and to not restrict them based on a structure that is designed to be good for everyone when it's really not good for anyone as part of that. We do have expectations in place. Certain committees have to happen. Certain groups need to meet, but the way in which we conduct it is left up to the annual conferences in many instances. If an issue arises, questions can be asked, procedures can be followed to correct any behavior that may become damaging to the church or the other structures of the denomination. And finally, number 16, to enact such other legislation as may be necessary subject to the limitations and restrictions of the Constitution of the church. That is, we have lots of legislation that comes to General Conference. It looks to change the Book of Discipline, change expectations of committees, change our social principles, enact new policies and procedures of the church, create official stances, change understandings of the way local churches work, church membership, all of that, as we've said before. This is that catch-all reminder that we have 1 through 15 to do, but there's much more the church may need to do, and we allow for that as long as it doesn't breach the limitations and restrictions of the Constitution. Now, there's also a way to change the Constitution, and that's the amendment process of the Constitution, which I can talk about later. Now that we have the basic responsibilities of the General Conference and what it means to do this work, next time my hope is to explain how this work gets done through committees, calendars, lobbying, legislation, voting, all of those interesting things, and to give you an idea of what to look for if you're at General Conference, watching General Conference, or reading reports. So until then, if you like this video, give us a like and a subscribe. I am really just getting started. You can also tell others about us. I'm really just trying to educate folks. I want to make sure people who are United Methodist adjacent, whoever, get the opportunity to learn how this works in an entertaining and fun way. Also, if you want, you can follow me on the socials. I'll put them on the screen here, and I'll put them in the description of the video. So until next time, onward to perfection, y'all.